Marcus was a big man. He didn't have the sharp, muscular frame of a typical soldier, but there was something about him that commanded attention. A lot of people in the small town thought Marcus was just a fat black farmer. He wore old clothes, worked long hours on his land, and never caused a fuss. What they didn't know was that Marcus had a past that could have made him one of the most dangerous men in the world. He had once been a Navy SEAL, trained for the toughest challenges, capable of handling enemies that most people would never imagine facing. But that was behind him now. He had left all that behind when he chose to live a quiet life in the country, surrounded by his crops and animals. The town people loved Marcus for his kindness. He always had a smile for everyone, a helping hand when someone needed it. Whether it was fixing a neighbor's fence, lending his tractor to someone in need, or just offering a kind word to those who needed it, Marcus was always there. He had a calm, gentle way about him, and no one suspected for a second that the man who grew the best corn and raised the healthiest cattle in town could have been a killer. But all of that was about to change. The small town that had been so peaceful for Marcus, and the life he had so carefully built for himself, was now being watched by a group of local criminals. A gang, led by a man named Tyler, had noticed Marcus. They were looking for someone they thought would be easy to push around. They were wrong, but they didn't know that yet. Tyler and his gang were the kind of people who liked to control everything around them. They'd been getting bolder in recent months, thinking they could do whatever they wanted without consequence. They'd been involved in petty thefts, dealing small amounts of drugs, and terrorizing anyone they could. But they were always looking for a bigger score, something more substantial. And Marcus, with his farm and his quiet life, seemed like the perfect target. They thought he was weak because of his size and the fact that he wasn't flashy or rich. They had no idea who they were dealing with. It all started when Tyler sent one of his men to scout Marcus's farm. The man was supposed to figure out the layout of the land, see if it was worth trying to extort Marcus, and report back. He spent days watching from a distance, hiding in the bushes, taking note of the routine. Marcus always went to town on Wednesdays to buy supplies and visit the post office. He spent the rest of the week on his farm, working alone or with a few hired hands. The farm was isolated, far enough from the town that Marcus could work in peace but still close enough for people to drop by for help when they needed it. The man who was watching thought it was strange that no one ever bothered Marcus, that no one ever tried to hurt him. He figured Marcus must be soft, just some big guy with no backbone. He didn't realize that the quiet, unassuming man he was spying on had been trained to face the harshest environments and deadliest situations. Still, the gang saw an opportunity. They thought they could intimidate Marcus, threaten him into selling his land. It seemed like an easy plan, but they had no idea what was coming. Tyler was the kind of man who used fear as a weapon. He believed that if you could make people afraid, you could control them. It had worked for him before, so he had no reason to think it wouldn't work now. He made his plan: they would show up at Marcus's farm, make a few threats, and force him to sell. They'd use his size against him, make him feel weak. It was a simple plan, one they thought would work with little effort. On the day they decided to make their move, Marcus was finishing up his chores in the barn. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the land. He had just fed his cattle and was preparing to lock up for the night when he saw a truck pull up the dirt road. It wasn't unusual for people to visit his farm, but this truck seemed out of place. It was a rusty old pickup, and the men inside looked rough. They were dressed in tattered clothes, and they weren't smiling. Marcus immediately sensed that something was off. The truck stopped a few feet from the barn, and Tyler and his gang of 3 men climbed out. Tyler was a tall, skinny man with a scruffy beard and a hardened look in his eyes. He walked toward Marcus with a confident swagger, as if he already owned the place. Marcus stood in the doorway of the barn, leaning against the frame, his arms crossed, watching them approach. Well, 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 Tyler said, sizing up Marcus. A big man out here all alone. You've got a nice piece of land here. Might be a good idea to sell it, don't you think? Marcus didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Tyler, then at the other men. They were all younger than him, rough around the edges. He could tell they weren't here for a friendly visit. Tyler took a few steps closer, trying to assert his dominance. We're gonna make this simple. We want your land. You're not gonna be able to keep it, so you might as well sell. We'll make sure you're taken care of. No need for any trouble. Marcus unfolded his arms slowly, his large frame moving with the ease of someone who had been trained to handle dangerous situations. He tilted his head slightly and looked at Tyler, his face unreadable. I don't want any trouble, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. I work hard for what I have here. It's not for sale. Tyler's grin faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. He wasn't used to people standing up to him. He took another step forward, this time angrier. You don't get it, do you? You're not in a position to refuse. We can make your life hell if we have to. You don't want to find out what happens when you say no to us. Marcus stood there silently, the weight of his past experiences bearing down on him. He knew this moment could go either way. He could walk away, let them have their say, and hope they left. But deep down, he knew they wouldn't. He had lived through worse situations than this. He had faced enemies who were far more dangerous than these punks, and he had survived. Tyler's gang, thinking Marcus was just a big, harmless farmer, started to get bolder. One of the men made a move toward Marcus, reaching into his jacket pocket. But before he could do anything, Marcus stepped forward in a blur of motion, his hand flashing out to grab the man's wrist. Tyler and the others froze. They hadn't expected that. They thought they could push this man around. But Marcus's calmness, his confidence, made them pause. They had underestimated him. The fear in Tyler's eyes was the first crack in their plan. What they didn't know was that the man they were messing with wasn't just a farmer. He was a trained killer. Tyler stepped back, his bravado slipping. This isn't over, he muttered, trying to hold onto his pride. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the dirt. Little did Tyler know, this was only the beginning. The days after the encounter with the gang felt strangely normal to Marcus. He went back to his routines, tending to his animals, working the fields, and repairing the fences that had been damaged over time. It was the kind of life he had always dreamed of when he left the Navy. It was simple, peaceful, and far away from the chaos of his former life. But deep inside, Marcus knew that peace could never last forever. The town may have been small, but it wasn't immune to trouble. Tyler and his gang had underestimated Marcus. They thought they could intimidate him, push him around, and get away with it. But after that first encounter, they were starting to see that he wasn't an easy target. Still, Tyler was determined to make the farm his. He didn't like being shown up, especially by someone who didn't even seem to fight back. The humiliation stung, and he wasn't the type of man to let things slide. The next week, Tyler gathered his crew in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of town. His gang was made up of a handful of rough men, but they lacked the experience and cunning that Marcus possessed. They were used to bullying people who were afraid of confrontation, not someone who could stand their ground without blinking. "We're going back there," Tyler said, pacing back and forth in front of his men. "This time, we're not giving him a choice. We'll make him understand who's in charge." One of the men, Rob, spoke up. "Tyler, I'm not sure about this. He's not like the others. We got lucky last time." Tyler turned to Rob, his eyes narrowing. "Lucky? No, we weren't lucky. We just underestimated him. It won't happen again. This time, we'll make sure he knows who's boss. We'll get his land one way or another. The gang members didn't argue. They had followed Tyler for years, and his decisions had always led them to some sort of profit. But this time, there was an uneasy feeling in the air. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. Meanwhile, Marcus was fully aware that something was off. It wasn't just the fact that a group of men had come to his farm and tried to bully him. He had lived through enough dangerous situations to know when trouble was brewing. His instincts, honed through years of military service, had never failed him. He had a strange feeling that Tyler wasn't done with him yet. It was late afternoon when Tyler's truck rumbled down the dirt road to Marcus's farm once again. Marcus was already on alert, watching from the window of his farmhouse. He didn't move, didn't even flinch as the truck came into view. This time, he wouldn't just let them come to him. He had a plan of his own. As the truck came to a stop, Tyler and his men climbed out. This time, there were 5 of them, all looking more determined than before. They had a different energy, one that said they weren't leaving without what they came for. Tyler made his way toward the barn, where Marcus was waiting. "Thought you'd just forget about us, huh?" Tyler said, a smug smile on his face. "We're not here to talk this time, Marcus. You'll either give us your land, or we'll take it. The choice is yours." Marcus walked slowly out of the barn, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. The setting sun bathed the scene in a golden light, giving everything a sense of calm before the storm. "I've told you before, Tyler. This land isn't for sale." Tyler stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Marcus. "It's not a negotiation. You'll either hand it over or you'll regret it. We can make things difficult, real difficult for you." Marcus stood still, his expression unreadable. The calmness in his voice didn't match the situation at all. "You can try, but it won't work. I'm not like the others you've pushed around." Tyler's smirk faltered for just a second, but then he recovered. He wasn't about to back down now. "You think you can stop me? You think you can stop all of us?" Marcus's eyes never left Tyler's, but there was something different in his gaze. Something that Tyler couldn't quite place. He didn't know it yet, but Marcus wasn't just standing his ground, he was waiting for the right moment to act. Suddenly, one of Tyler's men, the biggest of the group, lunged forward, trying to grab Marcus by the shoulders. The move was clumsy, filled with the kind of aggressive force that Marcus had seen time and time again. But Marcus was faster than they thought. Without breaking his calm demeanor, he sidestepped the man's lunge, twisting his body in a way that sent the man sprawling onto the ground. Tyler and his gang stood there in shock for a moment. They hadn't expected Marcus to move so quickly, to act with such precision. Tyler's face flushed red with anger. "Get him," he shouted. But as the rest of the gang rushed toward Marcus, he was already a step ahead. His training had kicked in. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed the closest man by the wrist, twisting it with the kind of strength that sent the man howling in pain. Another man tried to swing at him, but Marcus ducked, grabbing a nearby piece of wood and using it to knock the man off balance. Within moments, the gang was on the ground, nursing their wounds and trying to get back to their feet. Tyler stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had no idea who Marcus really was. He thought he was just a big, soft farmer. But now, as his men struggled to get up, Tyler realized how wrong he had been. Marcus wasn't just a farmer. He was someone who had been trained to face threats far worse than a few petty criminals. Tyler finally backed off, his bravado slipping. "This isn't over, Marcus. We'll be back," he muttered, his voice filled with anger and embarrassment. Marcus didn't respond. He simply watched them as they staggered back to their truck, leaving him standing there, calm and composed. But inside, his mind was already racing. He knew this wasn't over. It was far from over. As Tyler and his men drove off into the distance, Marcus took a deep breath and walked back into the barn. He knew that soon, they would return, and this time, it wouldn't be as easy. He was prepared now. But what he didn't know was how far Tyler and his gang would go to get what they wanted. And that was the danger Marcus couldn't ignore. The sun rose the next day with the same quiet beauty that had always marked the mornings on Marcus's farm. The birds sang in the trees, and the soft wind rustled through the leaves. It was the kind of morning Marcus had grown accustomed to. Yet, even as he stepped outside to start his day, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. The calm he had cherished for so long felt fragile now, and he knew it wouldn't last. Marcus didn't dwell on it too much. He had learned a long time ago to trust his instincts, but he also knew when to stay focused on the task at hand. He fed his cattle and checked his crops, just as he always did. But the peace of his routine felt different now. The events of the day before had left their mark on him. Tyler's gang had shown their cards, and Marcus knew they wouldn't back down easily. They had tasted failure, and failure wasn't something people like them took lightly. As the day passed, Marcus kept his eyes on the road. He wasn't sure when they would come back, but he knew it was only a matter of time. He had thought about it long into the night, going over every detail in his mind. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to escalate things, but there was a limit to how much anyone could take. And when you had lived through what Marcus had, there was a line you didn't cross. That afternoon, Marcus took a walk around the outskirts of his farm. His boots crunched on the gravel as he moved past the old barn and the large oak tree that had been standing for as long as anyone could remember. The air was still, but his senses were heightened. He was alert, listening for anything unusual. The wind had shifted direction, and the sounds of the world around him seemed to grow louder with each passing minute. And then, he heard it. The familiar rumble of an engine in the distance. Marcus didn't jump or rush to prepare. He had been expecting this. Instead, he stood still, waiting. The truck appeared around the bend, the same rusted vehicle he had seen the day before. It was followed by a second truck, and then a third. This time, there were more men in the trucks, more than the handful he had dealt with before. They were coming for him again. But this time, Marcus was ready. The trucks came to a stop, and Tyler stepped out first. His face was twisted in a snarl, his anger from the day before still fresh. He looked at Marcus, his eyes filled with a mix of contempt and frustration. "You really think you can keep us off your land?" Tyler spat, his voice sharp. "We gave you a chance. You refused. Now, you'll pay the price." Marcus didn't respond. He wasn't here for words. He had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than anything. Instead, he gave Tyler a brief glance, his expression calm, and then turned his attention to the men who were climbing out of the trucks behind him. There were 5 of them now, all looking just as dangerous and eager as before. Marcus noticed the weapons some of them carried, but he didn't flinch. He had faced much worse in his life. These men, with their bluster and bravado, didn't intimidate him. Tyler took a few steps closer, his fists clenched. "I told you it wouldn't be easy," he sneered. "You had your chance to make things right. Now, you'll see what happens when you mess with the wrong people." One of Tyler's men, a tall, broad-shouldered man, stepped forward, a look of determination on his face. "You're not going to get away with this, old man," he growled. Marcus's eyes flickered briefly to the man. There was something in the way he moved, a certain eagerness to prove himself. But Marcus wasn't interested in a fight. Not yet. With a single motion, he turned and walked toward the barn. The gang watched, puzzled for a moment, unsure of what to make of his calmness. But then, as they hesitated, the situation shifted. Marcus was preparing for them, but in a way they couldn't yet understand. Tyler motioned for his men to follow. "Get him," he barked. The men rushed toward Marcus, but just as quickly, they were met with resistance. The first man who reached Marcus was the one who had spoken earlier. He lunged, attempting to grab Marcus's arm. But Marcus was quicker. He sidestepped with a swift move, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted it with precision. The man's face contorted with pain, and with one fluid motion, Marcus disarmed him, sending him to the ground. The gang paused, the shock of seeing one of their own go down hitting them hard. Tyler's smirk faded slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. He wasn't backing down. "You're going to regret this," Tyler warned. "We've got more men than you, and we're not afraid to make this ugly." Marcus stood still, his large figure calm but ready. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he was more than capable of defending himself if it came to that. The other men hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. They had seen what had happened to their comrade, but they were still determined to overpower him. The situation was tense, and the air between them felt thick with danger. As Tyler signaled for another man to move in, Marcus quickly surveyed his surroundings. He had spent years in places where danger lurked at every corner, where a split-second decision could be the difference between life and death. His mind was sharp, calculating the best moves, the safest approach. Then, just as one of the men tried to swing a punch at him, Marcus reacted. He ducked under the swing, using the man's momentum against him, and in one smooth move, sent him sprawling to the ground. The man groaned in pain, his pride bruised more than his body. Tyler's anger boiled over, and he moved to step in, but Marcus raised a hand, signaling for him to stop. "You've made a mistake," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "I don't want trouble. But if you bring it to my doorstep, you'll regret it." Tyler's face twisted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. He couldn't understand how Marcus, who he thought was just a big, slow farmer, was able to take down his men so easily. He had no idea who he was dealing with. "You think you can stop us?" Tyler asked, his voice trembling with anger. "I don't think," Marcus replied. "I know." With that, Marcus took a step back, motioning for them to leave. The fight was over, and the gang knew it. They had underestimated Marcus at every turn, and now they had seen his true strength. But Tyler wasn't ready to admit defeat. "This isn't over, Marcus," Tyler spat. "We'll be back. You can't hide from us forever." Marcus watched them turn and retreat to their trucks. As they drove away, he felt a brief moment of relief. The danger had passed for now, but he knew they would return. They would never give up that easily. But Marcus was ready. He had faced much tougher battles in his life, and this was just another chapter in a story that wasn't over yet. The days following the last confrontation were tense, but the quiet rhythm of life on the farm continued. Marcus went back to work, fixing fences and checking on his crops, but his mind was always alert. The gang hadn't given up, and he knew they'd be back. He had handled them once, but he couldn't afford to take them lightly again. Their arrogance was dangerous, and he had no doubt they would escalate their efforts. The town was starting to talk. People who had always known Marcus as the friendly, reliable farmer were now whispering about him. They couldn't understand why a group of rough men was interested in him or his land. Most of the townsfolk had no idea who Marcus really was or what he was capable of. To them, he was just the big farmer who helped with crops and animals, a man of few words who preferred the company of his land to the chaos of the world. But Marcus knew better than to ignore the threats. He spent the next few days reinforcing the perimeter of his property. His training kicked in naturally. He didn't need to think about it, the skills were second nature to him. He made sure the gates were secure and that his tools and equipment were put away, hidden in places that were hard to reach. He knew that the gang might come back at any moment, and this time, he wasn't going to be caught off guard. One evening, just as the sun was setting, Marcus noticed something unusual. A figure was standing at the edge of his property, just beyond the field where his corn grew tall. He squinted, trying to make out the person's features. The figure didn't move. For a moment, Marcus thought it might be a neighbor, perhaps someone needing help. But as he walked closer, he recognized the silhouette of one of Tyler's men, Rob, the one who had been knocked down during their last encounter. Marcus slowed his pace. Rob was standing there, waiting for him. His arms were crossed over his chest, and he looked agitated. Marcus could tell that something was different. This wasn't just a casual visit. Rob wasn't here to fight, at least not yet. As Marcus walked up to him, Rob finally spoke. "I need to talk to you, Marcus. It's about Tyler." Marcus stopped a few feet away, watching Rob carefully. He didn't trust him. He didn't trust any of Tyler's gang. But he also knew that ignoring this situation could make things worse. "What's this about?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady. Rob shifted on his feet. I don't want any more trouble. I'm not like the others. I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to keep doing what we're doing." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He studied Rob's face, trying to figure out what was going on. This was a man who had been part of a group that had tried to threaten him, and yet now, he was standing here, telling Marcus he didn't want to continue. Marcus wasn't naive. He knew Rob had made his choices, but this moment could be a chance to change the course of things. "You've got a chance to make things right," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but there was a firmness in it that made Rob pause. "But you need to walk away from this before it gets any worse." Rob lowered his gaze, shame evident on his face. "I don't know if I can. Tyler's not the kind of man who lets people walk away. He'll come after me if I leave." Marcus's eyes softened, but there was no pity in them. "Then you need to be ready for that. You've made mistakes, but it's not too late to change. You just have to decide what kind of man you want to be." There was a long silence between them. Rob seemed to be weighing his options, the tension thick in the air. Marcus didn't push him. He knew that making a decision like this wasn't easy. But the moment was fragile, and he could sense that Rob was on the edge of making a choice that would either free him or trap him forever. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Rob finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to be done with all of this. I didn't know what I was getting into, but now, I can't back out." Marcus nodded, understanding the struggle in Rob's voice. "You have to make the choice for yourself. No one else can do that for you." Rob looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's. "I'll leave. But I can't do it alone. I'm asking for your help." Marcus paused. He had never been one to turn his back on someone in need, but this was different. Rob had been part of a gang that had tried to take his farm, threatened him, and even hurt his land. But Marcus could see the desperation in Rob's eyes. He was caught between the life he had known and the chance for something better. "You don't have to do this alone," Marcus said finally. "But you need to understand that if you walk away, there's no turning back. Tyler won't just let you go." Rob's face was a mixture of relief and fear. "I know. But I can't keep living like this." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then you've made your decision." Rob sighed in relief. "Thank you, Marcus. I don't know what's going to happen next, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night." Marcus gave him a small, reassuring smile. "That's a good place to start." With that, Rob turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkening evening. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching him go. He knew this wasn't the end of the story. Tyler and his gang wouldn't give up that easily. But at least for Rob, there was a chance to turn things around. Marcus hoped he would take it. The next few days were quiet, but Marcus could feel the storm building on the horizon. Rob had left, but Tyler's gang wasn't finished. They would return, And when they did, Marcus would be ready. He knew the stakes were higher now. Rob had made his choice, but the real battle was still ahead. Tyler wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted, and Marcus's land was the prize. That evening, as Marcus sat on his porch, watching the last light of the day fade behind the hills, he felt a sense of resolve wash over him. He had fought in battles before, and he had always come out on top. This was no different. It was his home, his land, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. But deep inside, Marcus knew this fight wasn't just about land anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And when the gang returned, he would show them exactly why they had made a grave mistake. The days passed slowly, each one carrying the weight of the decision Marcus had made. The quiet peace he had once known was slipping away, and although he had always been ready for hard work and difficult times, he knew this was different. This wasn't just about tending to his farm or fighting off an occasional predator. This was about defending everything he had built: his home, his land, his way of life. Tyler and his gang had retreated after their last confrontation, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be long before they came back. They weren't the kind to take defeat lightly, especially not from someone they had underestimated. The tension in the air was thick, and Marcus could feel it in his bones. He wasn't sure when the gang would return, but he knew they would, and when they did, they would come with everything they had. As the days passed, Marcus made preparations. His farm was more than just a piece of land to him, it was everything he had worked for. His crops, his animals, his home, all of it depended on the peace he had fought so hard to find. He knew that fighting wasn't always the answer, but sometimes, when it was the only choice, you had to stand your ground. And that's exactly what he intended to do. Marcus spent his days making sure everything was secure. He reinforced the gates, tightened the locks, and double-checked the perimeter of the farm. He had no intention of being caught off guard again. Each night, as he sat on his porch, looking out over the fields, he would replay the events in his mind: the confrontations with Tyler's men, the way they had underestimated him. And each time, he knew he had made the right choice. But as ready as he was, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Marcus noticed movement at the edge of his property. He had been expecting this, but it still sent a chill through him. There, just beyond the edge of the field, was the same rusted truck from before. Tyler's men had returned. They weren't being subtle this time. The truck rumbled loudly as it approached, kicking up dust along the dirt road. Marcus stood up slowly, his large frame moving with quiet purpose. His hand instinctively went to the small shed where he kept some of his tools, not for use against men, but for protection. He wasn't going to let them walk all over him again. This time, he would show them that they had made a mistake by coming back. Tyler's truck came to a stop in front of the barn. The same group of men stepped out, their faces hard and determined. This time, they were armed, each one carrying something more dangerous than before. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He wasn't worried about their guns or their threats. He had faced much worse in his life, and this was just another test. Tyler stepped forward, his eyes scanning Marcus's face for any sign of weakness. He wasn't smiling now. The cockiness from before had been replaced with something else, a silent fury that Marcus could feel from where he stood. "You think you can keep this place?" Tyler's voice was colder than before, his words sharp. "You think you can stop us? We've had enough of playing around." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He simply stood his ground, looking at Tyler and his men with a calm that unnerved them. "I've told you before, Tyler. This land isn't for sale." Tyler sneered. "You don't get it, do you? You're out of options. You're not going to stop us. You've made your choice, and now you'll pay for it." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't react to the anger in Tyler's voice. Instead, he took a deep breath and spoke with the same calm authority he had used before. "You've been given a choice, too. And now it's too late for you." Tyler's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. Marcus didn't answer. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over the men. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. The wind had picked up, rustling the trees and pushing the dust across the ground. It was a moment of calm before the storm. Without warning, Marcus made his move. He wasn't as fast as he had been the first time, but his strength and experience were unmatched. He knew exactly where the weak points were, and he moved with the precision that only someone with his background could. The first man to approach him, the one who had been so eager to prove himself before, tried to grab Marcus's arm. But Marcus was quicker. He twisted his body, throwing the man off balance and sending him to the ground in a heap. It was swift and efficient, the kind of move that left no room for hesitation. The others hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of how to proceed. They had expected Marcus to be slow, to be an easy target. But they had forgotten one key detail: Marcus wasn't just a farmer. He was a Navy SEAL, trained to handle situations far worse than this. And he wasn't about to let them take what was his. Tyler's face twisted with rage as he motioned for his men to advance. But Marcus was already one step ahead. The next man who came at him swung a heavy object toward his head, but Marcus ducked, spinning around and using the man's momentum to throw him onto the ground. It wasn't a fight for Marcus, it was a demonstration of control. He wasn't here to hurt anyone, but he wasn't going to let them take what was his. The remaining men stepped back, their faces filled with uncertainty. They were beginning to realize that this wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. Tyler, who had been so confident just moments ago, now stood frozen, his jaw clenched tight. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Marcus to fight back with such precision, such force. "You think you can stop us?" Tyler muttered, his voice shaking with frustration. Marcus didn't answer. He took a step forward, his presence looming large. The sun was almost gone now, the world bathed in a dim twilight. "I don't need to stop you," Marcus said softly. "You've already lost." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of what had just happened. Tyler and his men stood there, their weapons in hand, but none of them moved. They were out of their depth, and they knew it. The intimidation they had once relied on was gone. In its place was the cold realization that they had made a grave mistake by underestimating Marcus. Finally, Tyler turned and motioned for his men to retreat. There was no grand speech, no last-ditch effort to save face. They simply got into their trucks and drove off, leaving Marcus standing there, watching them go. The threat was over, for now. Marcus stood in the fading light, his heart still calm but his mind racing. He knew this wasn't the end. Tyler and his gang would return, they always did. But Marcus was ready. He had been ready for a long time. And no matter what came next, he would protect his farm, his home, and the life he had fought so hard to build. As the trucks disappeared into the distance, Marcus turned back toward his farm. The land was quiet again, the fields stretching out before him. The fight had been hard, but it had been worth it. For Marcus, this was more than just about survival, it was about standing firm, no matter the odds. And no one would ever take that from him.